All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back to the channel. Jesse, why should I be excited that Nick Diaz is coming back? What, are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. I've been watching the sport since 2016. Okay. Well, I can tell you about a dozen reasons why you should be excited, but I'm going to tell you a story specifically that will outline exactly why you should be excited that Nick Diaz comes back. Actually, I'm going to talk about Nick Diaz for a long time. I'm going to talk about a lot of things, but I'm going to tell you guys one story that only the hardcores will even know about, like people who have been watching this sport for a long time. Now, I've been watching this sport. I have not missed a pay-per-view since 2001, okay? Tito Ortiz versus Ken Shamrock won. Shamrock? Who the fuck is Ken Shamrock? I have no idea. But Shamrock, Tito, won. I have not missed a single pay-per-view since then. Think about the number of events that is. Well, I think we could actually figure that out mathematically. But nonetheless, okay? So when we talk about, a certain fight where Nick Diaz fought Joe Riggs, that was not even close to the beginning of my UFC viewership. I was deep in UFC by then. But that particular fight has an aftermath story that is one of the greatest stories of all time, okay? Now, we'll get to that also. But first, what I want to say is this. I think people who have recently started watching the sport, which is an enormous amount of the viewer base. Now, look, I don't get into this like, I'm a better fan than you because I've been watching longer. I don't care. If you're passionate about the sport and you started watching because Floyd Mayweather fought Conor McGregor, it's not like I'm a better fan than you. You know, it's just like, it just means that I saw some things that you may not have seen and you might not know about. And I'm going to educate you on those things right now. Now, I would say most hardcores already know where this story is going if I brought up Joe Riggs and I brought up Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz, because this is one of the most epic stories ever. But yeah, I mean, look, Nate Diaz is one of the biggest stars in the sport. Everyone knows that, right? And the reason that he had a big launching pad where he ended up in the Ultimate Fighter and he won Ultimate Fighter is because Nick Diaz was a superstar in the UFC, right? And his very first foray into superstardom in the UFC is when he knocked out Robbie Lawler when Robbie Lawler was when Robbie Lawler was a up-and-coming superstar right around my age. But anyway, we'll get into all that. Now, if you like the content, subscribe and ring the bell. I'm going to give you a comprehensive Nick Diaz breakdown right now. But we're going to start with the story that I alluded to right there and the one that I assume I'm going to make the thumbnail about. So in, I believe it was 2008. I should have looked that up, but whatever. Right around 2007 to 2009, right in that little sector, right? Nick Diaz fights Joe Riggs. Now, both these guys are killers, okay? Now, a lot of you might not even know who Joe Riggs is at this point if you just started watching the last few years, but Joe Riggs, okay, so imagine if I had bleached blonde hair, okay? That's why I love Joe Riggs, is because at the time I had platinum white hair, and and people were like, dude, Joe Riggs looks like Jesse. I was like, I'll take that. I'll take that all day long. But then he fought Nick Diaz. I was like, well, I can't root against Nick Diaz. So they had an incredible fight, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They gave Joe Riggs the decision. So in the hospital, right, after the fight, like happens all the time where fighters who fight each other, they beat the hell out of each other, and then they end up at the same hospital, and they take pictures together where they're holding hands and stretchers next to each other. So are you shocked that you've never seen a picture of Nick Diaz holding hands with another fighter in the hospital? Because I'm not, and you shouldn't be, because that would never happen, okay? Because here's what happened when Nick Diaz and Nate Diaz ran into Joe Riggs in the hospital, okay? So Nick and Nate thought that Nick got robbed in that, in that fight, or in the decision, right? And so the way that they handled that was they were like, all right, well, I guess this is going to be round 2 then. And they jumped Joe Riggs in the hospital. Like, Joe Riggs told the story. He said that he was just like, hey, man, what's up? And they literally just mobbed him. Well, Nick Diaz mobbed him first. And then he's trying to fend him off. And he sees, and Nate is there. And he starts talking to Nate, kind of like, dude, help me. Like, get your brother off me, man. He's going crazy. Like, to Joe Riggs. Joe Riggs is a crazy guy. Like, Joe Riggs is a legit crazy guy. He's not like one of these straight shooter fighters that just I don't know, who's a good example? He's not Demetrius Johnson, right? Who's like a martial artist that it would be completely bizarre for him to be fighting in a hospital. Like, Joe Riggs is a guy who might maybe be fighting in a hospital. He shot himself in the leg with a gun. He had, anyway. But he's looking at Nate and he's asking him for help. He's all, dude, get a hold of your brother. And so Nate's contribution was, Nate was like, get a hold of my brother. And then so Nate started bombing on him too. So they jumped him. So Joe Riggs told the story later, and Joe Riggs is like, he said that in the middle of this fight, he shit his pants. He was getting jumped by both the Diaz. He just got in a 3-round war with Nick Diaz. Then at the hospital, the Diaz brothers jumped him and he shit his pants.
And he comes, he's talking smack. I'm like, well, go back to WC, Bush League, you just got beat up, 2 in a row, you're out. Just talking shit to him. He was getting the stitches and he was getting stitched up and he's like, F this. God, dude. He comes flying out of the room and I had my hands down. Never in a million years I thought he saw a punch. And he throws a right hook, hit me right in the chin, and hit me right in the butt. And then I kind of went down to the knee and I was done. My hands hurt. Then when this fight was on, scrambled and ended up putting against the wall and just tied flips and started kneeing the shit at him. No one's bleeding, I kept kneeing him and
So you had like an IV in your arm when this is all going on?
Yeah, I IV going, blood spraying everywhere, and it was like a horror movie. And I'm kneeing him, I'm telling his brother, I'm like, dude, get your freaking brother off me. He's like, no, man, no. His brother's like an idiot, just hanging out in his ball sack like a barnacle.
So who stopped this thing? Because I'm sure the hospital was tripping.
Yeah, they're squealing. There was this fat lady going, wah, wah! It was hilarious. And then just like security guard, some big dude separated us and went back with him. After that, he just keeps John talking more crap.
So anytime that I think about like the legacy of the Diaz brothers, man, like that's the story I think of because I just think it's hilarious. Like, because most of these guys are hyping fights, they're running, like at this point, these guys are older and yeah, they're hyping fights, they'll fight, they're cool afterwards. But back in the day, they were not, this was like playground shit to them, right? Like it was like, I don't like that guy, hype, fight, and they were legit enemies. Like they see each other at the hospital, they're fighting again. That's how they rolled. That's why they were such huge stars, because there's such a genuine thing about that, right? Where it's like, there's all this bullshit and like whatever. There's no bullshit with them. Like there's just none. If they see you at the hospital, they're gonna fucking fight you again. I don't know, man. To me, in this sport, you have to respect that. It's like Masvidal. Masvidal's like, yeah. I mean, before he became a multimillionaire and had a lot of shit that he could lose if he got sued, right? But Masvidal, dude, everybody knew he'll piece you up outside the octagon. He just fought Darren Till. And so, Leon Edwards goes by, hey, maybe I'll see you in July. He's all, maybe you'll see me right now, actually, backstage. There's a purity to that, dude. If someone ever got like seriously hurt with like a sucker punch or something, that's a different thing than two men being squared up, looking each other in the face, and one of them actually moving on them in an environment that's outside the cage. Like, I don't know. It would be kind of crazy if everybody did it, but it's cool when there's like a handful of people that do it. So going into this fight with Robbie Lawler, you got to understand, like Nick Diaz, when he came on the scene, right? He was, dude, I don't think I'm wrong when I say he was like 19 years old when he fought Robbie Lawler. That might be crazy town, but he was not older than 21. That I'm 100% certain of. But I'm pretty sure Robbie was like 21 or 22. And so Nick Diaz, he comes into that fight, he's getting fed, right? He's getting fed to a lion. Like that's the way, like how many times have you heard this story, right? The UFC is a business, okay? Like I actually heard someone say this yesterday. It was really, really smart, where they were saying that like the person who holds the title in the UFC, that's not a real title. I mean, it is, but it isn't, because the way that you get to fight for the title is not natural. There's not a bracket. It's not like it's not like March Madness where you just keep on, everybody has an even chance, you get seeded and all that, but like you have to fight. It's like the way you fight for the title, there's all this stuff that has nothing to do with the actual athletic sport that you're participating in. All kinds of stuff. Specifically, the amount of eyeballs that you're going to bring in. But that's a huge outside factor to where basically Dana and his team pick who fights for the title, and that is what it is, right? The only reason that a person who's won a bunch of fights in a row has to fight for a title at a certain point is because they have to protect the sanctity of the title itself. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything, right? But if they could just pick, the guy, like if they would have Nate Diaz fight for the title instantly if they could. Of course, because they would have Nick Diaz and Nate. They had Nate Diaz fight George Masvidal for a made-up title. So anyway, but like, when you think about the business model itself, you have these guys that are capable of being huge stars. Now, the challenge is they have to win fights to be huge stars, right? Like you see it and you're like, that guy's got it, but they still have to win their fights though, right? And so when you think about that and you look at who these guys end up fighting, you have to look at it through that lens. Oh, Sean O'Malley won't fight a ranked fighter. Really? You really think Sean O'Malley won't fight a ranked fighter? Or you think the UFC recognizes that he could potentially be the biggest star they've had in the last 5 years? And so, Sean O'Malley could be a Conor McGregor level star, okay? Or maybe not Conor, but close, like very, very close. He has huge, so they're protecting him, obviously. They need him to win. As he develops, they need him to win. And so Robbie Lawler was just like that when he was 21. He was a savage, man. I am so pissed I can't show footage during this video because I want to be able to show you guys footage from Robbie Lawler when he was fighting when he was young. Go look it up. Just go watch the Nick Diaz and Robbie Lawler fight from whatever that was, 2004 or whatever. I remember exactly where I was during that fight because I was a massive Robbie Lawler fan. Robbie Lawler was my dude. This ended up being the last time I ever didn't root for Nick Diaz though. But Nick Diaz was getting fed to Robbie Lawler because Robbie Lawler was an up-and-coming massive star. And Nick Diaz I remember in the interview right before the fight, they showed this on the countdown. They said something about Robbie Lawler's a knockout artist and you're more of a ground fighter. Something like that, where they said, you're not a knockout artist. And Nick just looked at him, he's like, how do you know I'm not a knockout artist? And they were like, I don't know. That's just what was on the card. He's like, all right, cool. And then Nick went out there and he fucking knocked Robbie Lawler out and knocked him out it was one of those things where before the fight, this is a grappler versus striker. If Nick can get it to the ground, he's a I don't remember, purple or brown belt in Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which I can tell you right now, by the way, if you're a purple belt at Cesar Gracie school, that is equivalent to potentially even getting close to being a black belt in other schools. I actually know a dude, the guy who first brought me to that gym had won worlds. He had won the national, I'm pretty sure he won worlds. I don't want to say the wrong thing because when he told me that, I didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu tournaments, but I'm pretty sure that he had won worlds oh man, I don't want to say the wrong thing here, but he had was a multi-time champion at purple belt and he still didn't advance to brown belt. But I feel like I heard that if you win the national, if you win worlds, you automatically get belted up. That might just be from blue to purple or something. I don't know, whatever. Bottom line is, this guy was the world champion and he didn't even advance at that point. They are very stringent with belts at Caesar's gym. So if Nick Diaz was a purple belt, that's still an absolute fucking wizard on the ground. That's equivalent to a black belt in lots of different schools. So, but anyway, the whole point was he wants to get the fight to the ground and you don't want to stand with Robbie Lawler. And Nick just stood right in front of him and talked shit. And Robbie Lawler was used to being the guy that screams in people's faces. And Nick was just like, what's up, Stockton, bitch? Stockton, bitch. And then he knocked him out cold, fucking statue on the way down. One of those ones where, oh, the lights are out. And that was the birth of Nick Diaz. And everybody, he's been a superstar ever since. Now, another thing that, thinking about the gym. So the gym, so if you guys watch the countdown, the gym that they filmed, the part where Nick was at Cesar Gracie's gym, that's our gym. Or that was the gym that we were at before we moved from California to Texas. I spent so much time, 6 days a week, dude. And I wasn't even training that much. Giselle was there. I loved it there, man. I loved it. I was just kick the shit out of the bag and just watch the kids train fucking hours and hours a day. That place was our family. Seeing it on the countdown, I was like, man. When we moved to Texas, I was heartbroken. Legit, I'm not being hyperbolic. It felt like my heart was like an egg that someone just went, psh, and it was just sadness, just all throughout my veins, just emulating from my chest. I was so fucking sad, dude. And it was 100% because I was so used to every single day being at that gym, hanging out with all the guys, kicking the bag and watching the kids train, bullshitting with the coaches. It was dude, I fucking love that place, man. It was devastating when we left. That's the only thing. That was the only thing that really, really hurt about leaving California. And my family's in California. And that's the thing where, if I'm being totally honest, over the first 2 weeks, if someone would have been dude, you can just undo this and go back, I would have done it. And it was exclusively because I fucking missed that gym so much. But yeah, it was cool to see them, do the thing with Nick there. But also, if you guys watch my other video, the one where I did on Sean O'Malley, and then you saw Giselle competing in that tournament, she hasn't been training at any gym to take credit for any of that. That's all shit she learned at Caesar's gym under Cam King, her coach. But anyway, so, here's the other thing. I don't think that people realize the run that Nick Diaz went on, okay? Like, Nate, I looked all this stuff up last night because, I watched the fights as they happened, but it's been a while and whatever. So, but Robbie Lawler, his prime was, right towards the end of the Strikeforce Elite XC, and then when he got into the UFC and became the champion, he went on an 8-1 run. And you're talking, in the middle of his career, right? This is not, he's not, just coming up. He had come up, he had lost a few, won a few, lost a few, and then he hit his prime. And it was boom, and he ran through everybody. The only fight he lost when he was 8-1 was to Johnny Hendricks, and it was a decision. He avenged that loss and won. And Nick Diaz, exact same thing. It was he would come up, he had lost a couple, won up, lost a couple. And one of the reasons, I didn't even think about this before, but when I was looking at Nick Diaz's his record, the last loss that he had before he left UFC for a while was against Sean Shirk. You know how the Diaz brothers, they're steroids. You guys are on steroids. I didn't really even think about it, but Nick lost to Sean Shirk, who was the last loss he had right before this run. And Sean Shirk was the most roided out fighter ever. You picture Michael Chandler, and then imagine if Michael Chandler did an enormous cycle of juice. Look how muscular he is anyway, and then imagine if he just did a huge brick house, testosterone, deca, Winnie, run. That's Sean Shirk. They called him the muscle shark. He was juiced out of his mind. And he beat Nick. And then after that, Nick went on a run where he went 16-1. And the only fight that he lost was bullshit. It was a cut over his eye against KJ Noons that was bullshit. Go watch Nick Diaz versus KJ Noons 1. And then go watch Nick Diaz versus KJ Noons 2 and go, okay, which of these guys was obviously the better fighter? He just got cut. It was bullshit. They wouldn't stop the fight at the nowadays they wouldn't stop the fight for that cut. But think about that, dude. In the middle of his career, 16-1, and you actually just take that one out. He won 16 consecutive fights. When does that happen? When is a guy at that level, where they're I don't know, whatever his record was at that point, where he probably had 15 to 20 fights already. And then they win 16 straight, okay? And he was burying guys, dude. He was fucking burying guys. Because Nick Diaz's style, so I heard him talking about himself. Oh, I got a big thing to talk about, actually. Fuck, I need to not forget to talk about this. But when he was talking about in the interview, he was saying he's a much better striker now than he was against Robbie Lawler. He doesn't think Robbie's gotten much better. And what he was saying is he's like, I can see the punches coming much better. And if you really watch Nick Diaz, because Nick Diaz is an exceptional striker, but if someone just watched, he's one of those guys where if someone watched 1 or 2 sequences of his, you'd kind of be like, he's a great striker, because he doesn't have that style where he kind of coils and then boom, the kind of thing, where you watch Calvin Kattar or something, you watch him and when he hits someone, it looks utterly textbook. And it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because what Nick does is way more valuable, because what Nick does is he makes sure he's got long ass limbs, and he realized what he recognized early in his career is you don't need to hit someone like that. You don't need to wah, 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 wah. You just don't need that much pop on it. Punch your hand from this distance. Now imagine doing that to your face if you don't see it coming. Nick, his whole thing was all about seeing the shots coming. So he'd be here and he's see it coming, and then he would just volume you to death. His accuracy was bananas. He took a little bit off his punches and made sure he was landing solid. And you just see guys just wilt and then just fucking fold. He would bury these fucking guys. Fucking bury them. And it's exciting to watch because he would just do it watching, it's the reason why you like watching Gaethje fight early on. I mean, I still love watching Gaethje fight, but how Gaethje approached it, where he's these guys will all break before me. That's how Nick was. He didn't just beat him; he'd break them, fucking all of them. They would all break. It was they would be here, and he would just see them just be it wasn't he did knock Robbie Lawler out with a statue shot, but during that run where he won 16 straight fights, I mean, you're talking guys you would just watch them be my body and my spirit can't go anymore. Over and over and over, they would just wilt and then fold. He would fucking break them. Now, if you fight a person and you get knocked out with a big heavy shot and then you wake up, you're like, what happened? Which is more emotionally devastating? Getting hit with a big shot or having someone over a series of rounds beat you and fucking break you. Because there's no question which is a better way to beat a guy, right? It's like Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos, exactly the same thing. JDS, first time Cain fought him, he caught him with that shot upside the temple super early in the fight. Cain goes out, first loss. They fight again, and Cain fucking buried JDS. I mean, just utterly buried him, beat him half to death in both those fights. JDS, you look at the before and after pictures of his face, he looks like a different person. Like who did a better job winning a fight? You know what I mean? It's like, and that's that. I mean, dude, Nick is so fun to watch. And then here's the other thing that I wanted to make sure I didn't forget to say. Now, being respectful and not meaning to like make assumptions about people where I'm not 100% sure, but I think I'm pretty safe saying this. That when he did that interview with Ariel, I don't remember exactly when it was, a couple years ago maybe. And he was like slurring and talking really slow. People were like, "Man, I'm worried about Nick. Like, I think he's punch drunk." I was like, "Man, he's not punch drunk. He's just drunk. Like, he's not punch drunk. Like, I think he's just drinking, you know." And if you watch his interviews for the countdown, he's super clear. Like, he's just, I mean, you could tell this guy completely clean and sober. His eyes are clear. He's speaking clearly. He's being like well structured in his sentences, etc. Like this version of Nick, and you got to keep in mind, dude, he takes a 5-year suspension for smoking weed. Now that can be a bad thing for a lot of people, but you also got to consider he hasn't taken any serious damage for almost 8 years, actually, because the only fight in between his fight in 2013 with George St. Pierre was the Anderson Silva fight. And then, so he fought in 2013, then he fought Anderson in 2015, and then he hasn't fought since. So, if you pull, he hadn't fought for 2 years when he fought Anderson. So you're literally looking at like an 8-year layoff. And I would say for most people, that would be a death blow to their career. I would say for most people. I don't think that's the case for Nick. I think Nick is highly likely to come out, and because those fucking guys are crazy. They always train. So, I'm pretty bullish on him in this fight. I gotta admit, I'm pretty bullish that he's gonna win, because here's the other thing. Think about Robbie Lawler. Now, so here's another thing. So Robbie Lawler is like the quintessential guy where it's like you only have so many fights in you. $1 Million Baby, when the guy's like, he's like, you only have so many fights in a person. And I think that the fight against Tyron Woodley is the one that beat it out of Robbie. So this in the countdown also, the guy, one of Robbie's trainers said, you have this period when you're early in your career where you have the fire, like you're just like an animal, like a young animal screaming in people's faces, like you have the fire. And then you start to train, and then you learn how to fight, right? And you become more cerebral. And there's this little Goldilocks zone where you haven't lost the fire and you know how to fight. And then you know how to fight, but you lost the fire. Tyron Woodley, perfect example, right? It's exactly what you're looking at here. And Robbie Lawler, I believe that's what you're looking at with him. Like I said, dude, I was the biggest Robbie Lawler fan on earth. Like this is not me talking shit. I just think Robbie now is a cerebral fighter, but the fire's gone, And you can't do it without the fire. You can't. It cannot be done. You can't do it, not at the highest level, without the fire. But if you think about the fight against Colby Covington, because Colby Covington has the most similar style to Nick Diaz, volume. Now Nick's not going to go for the takedown, but in terms of the striking, look at that Robbie Lawler fight against Colby Covington. He just volumed him to death, and everyone was like, "What is Robbie doing then?" That is exactly what I expect this fight to be like. I think Nick is going to volume him just like Colby Covington, and Nick is actually more accurate with his punches. He's more accurate with his punches than anybody. Like when I watch Nick fight, having never seen him train, I hypothesize that he has spent so much fucking time, like he spends more time on that crazy bag, that's attached to both ends, and it just flies all over the place, the thing that's fucking impossible to hit. I think he has spent more time on that bag than most people like have in their entire life. Just boom, boom, because that's his. That really is how he strikes. It's like making sure that he makes good contact. To me, when I watch him fight, he looks like a person who was trained on that fucking bag over and over and over. And so because does it matter if you throw a huge punch if you don't land, or is it better if you land solid from here? So that's kind of what I expect from that fight. Is I think Nick's going to do really. But again, it's a mystery. He's been out for so long, but I don't know. All indications are good. So anyway, that's what I got. Subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell. Also, maybe I should do another video about this. But actually, I will do another video about this. I have something to say about Volkanovski. He looks sick to me. Like he's coming off COVID. He looks like he lost a ton of muscle mass to me. I don't know. Maybe he shaved his head and it makes him look different. But anyway, if you like the content, subscribe and ring the bell.